Let's talk about body recomposition, how to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. This was a topic that was brought up by Wayne in the comment section of one of my recent videos, who more specifically was looking for tips on how to lose fat and build muscle at the same time after he's already achieved his ideal six-pack. He's wondering if he should just bump up to maintenance level calories, and he mentioned that many people are confused by all these calculations, and I agree. So we're going to get to a few different options that you may want to consider and even experiment with. But first I gotta mention that I really find that most people find it incredibly challenging just to focus on one goal at a time. If fat loss is their goal, being consistent with their calorie deficit day in and day out until they achieve their goal of getting lean is challenging in and of itself, let alone if you're trying to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. And if you're trying to build muscle at the same time that you're losing fat, you're going to slow down that fat loss process. So it's going to take a lot longer than it needs to be. And vice versa, a lot of guys find it incredibly challenging to build muscle, even if they're in a consistent gentle calorie surplus, let alone if they're trying to lose fat at the same time. And if you're trying to lose fat at the same time, meaning you're going to be consuming less, so even less of a calorie surplus and maybe not even in calorie surplus at all, it's going to be excruciatingly painfully slow to go through that muscle building process. So it's going to take a lot longer than it needs to be. So there are three instances when I do find people do experience a body recomposition where they are able to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. Number one is if they're overweight. So if they're in a calorie deficit, they've got more fat stores to pull from that could be utilized to build muscle. Number two is if you're completely new to training and you want to lose fat at the same time, even if you're in a calorie deficit, there's a really, really good chance that you could build muscle at the same time there. I say it's probably the best case scenario if you're completely new to lifting and losing fat at the same time is when you're going to experience that kind of body recomposition there. Number three is if you used to work out and you experienced really good results in the past, but you haven't been able to work out in a really long time. You've lost some muscle during that layoff and now you want to get back into weight training and you want to lose some fat at the same time. There's a really good chance that you're going to build muscle while losing fat, but that gain in muscle is just regaining the muscle that you lost while you were detrained. It's not likely you're going to be gaining more muscle tissue there. So I really find that for most people, if you've been lifting for more than 5 years, trying to achieve a body recomposition where you're losing fat and building muscle at the same time is really, really difficult. And I find like most people are better served to just focus on a singular goal. If you still have some fat to lose, just lose it, then move on to muscle building, especially if you already have a six-pack, you're already really lean. I mean, this is a case where body recomposition is going to be damn near impossible for you. Like I said, increased chance the more body fat you have to experience a recomposition. But if you're really lean to begin with, your chances of losing fat and building muscle at the same time are really, really difficult. I mean, you're really just fighting against your body at that time, which is why I highly recommend that you just focus on a singular goal and then move on to the muscle building afterwards. So let's explore three different options that you may want to consider here. Number one and number two comes from Tom Venuto, author of Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle here and Body Fat Solution down there. Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle is a fat loss book, and in there he teaches a calorie cycling approach where you're in a calorie deficit, a 20 to 30% calorie deficit for 3 days, and one day you eat at maintenance level calories. Now, in his other book, The Holy Grail Body Transformation Program, where he's really exploring body recomposition, he took it a step further. So instead of 3 days in a deficit, one day at maintenance, it's 3 days in a deficit, one day in a 15 to 20% calorie surplus. So you're giving yourself that little bit of extra chance of maybe gaining some muscle throughout that process. So that's option number one. If your main focus is you want to lose fat, but you want to give yourself a little bit of chance of building some muscle, that's an approach that you may want to explore and experiment with yourself, just knowing that it's going to slow the fat loss process down a little bit. Option number two is to go 3 days in that 20 to 30% calorie deficit, and then 2 to 3 days in that 15 to 20% calorie surplus. So if you do that for 2 days, again, you're giving yourself a little bit more chance of building muscle, but you're also slowing that fat loss process down a little bit more. And again, 3 days is going to give yourself an even greater chance of building muscle, but again, much slower with the fat loss there. It's basically, if you're looking at things on a weekly basis there, you're really only looking at like a small calorie deficit. So again, fat loss is going to be much slower, but there's a slight chance that you may build some muscle throughout that process. So it just depends where you're at in the journey, just knowing that either or it's going to be a slow process. You're just kind of hovering around that maintenance mark there. Lots of calculations to consider in there. So much like Wayne was saying there, that's a lot to kind of process. Like okay, 3 days in a 20 to 30% deficit, 2 to 3 days in a 15 to 20% calorie surplus. I got to make those calculations there. First of all, I got to know what my maintenance level calories are. I'll include a link down below in the description to kind of help give you a guide where you'll enter your age, height, weight, your activity level. That's going to give you your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure. So that's how many calories you consume on a daily basis just to maintain your weight. So from there, calorie deficit, you would subtract 15 to 20. So you subtract 20 to 30% for the calorie deficit days. If you want the 15 to 20% calorie surplus, you add that onto your TDEE. So again, lots of calculations, and really important to know, these are just estimates. And we never, no matter what that calculation says, we never burn the same amount of calories every single day. Our maintenance level calories are always in flux depending on so many different factors. So it's really difficult to know when we're at maintenance level calories there. So it is a challenge to make those calculations. And for myself personally, I've done the calorie cycling approaches in the past where I'd go several days in a calorie deficit, have a refeed day in there. I just found that I prefer to just keep my calories consistent no matter what. It sustains my energy each and every day, stays consistent. My performance stays consistent. I consistently feel satiated throughout the week rather than having up days and then down days. And it just makes, for me personally, even tracking my progress a lot easier with the scale weight and all that kind of stuff. So I like to keep things consistent. But again, those are options to consider that you may want to explore and experiment with, or you may want to go with option number 3, which is to just bump up to maintenance level calories. Again, roll with the calculation that I just shared down there below. And research does show that maintenance level calories is pretty much going to give you just as much a chance at building muscle as if you're in a 5% gentle calorie surplus or a 15% calorie surplus. Now that 15% calorie surplus, no better than the 5%. The only difference is you're going to gain more fat throughout that process. The benefit of being in a higher calorie surplus is that you're going to see your scale weight go up. You're going to know that you're in a calorie surplus. If you're in a 5% calorie surplus, it's going to take a long time to see that scale weight go up. So it may take a month to see your body weight go up a pound. And so you might spend a couple of weeks going, am I in a surplus or am I at maintenance? Should I bump things up? Should I keep them the same? It can be tough to gauge your progress. But again, it just depends on if you want that more aggressive approach to 15% calorie surplus to know that you're in a calorie surplus, but know that, all right, I'm gonna have to go through another cutting phase after this to lose the excess fat that I gained, or if you're comfortable just with that slow and steady approach and rolling with that. And again, maintenance, you should see your scale weight's pretty much going to stay the same throughout. And that's still going to give you a really good chance of building muscle. And there's a slight chance that you may lose fat in that process if you are building muscle throughout there. Again, if you do lose fat, it's going to be like ridiculously slow. It's going to take a very long time to notice that difference there. But if you're already lean, you have a 6-pack, you're happy with where you're at, you roll with maintenance for a while, you're like, oh yeah, I'm gaining some muscle, but I'm actually looking a little bit tighter as well. Like you already look great. So any extra fat loss that comes from it is just a bonus from that point. So right or wrong, depends on the individual, what you're going for. Those are just my thoughts there. Personally, I really like to roll with just a gentle 5% calorie surplus when I'm in the muscle building phase. Give myself that best chance to gain some muscle mass through the process, and then just do like, after 6 to 8 months of that, go through like a really short 2 to 4 week mini cut just to burn off any excess fat that I may have gained throughout that process there. Those are the approaches I like to roll with, but again, If you're set on the body recomposition, those are some options that you may want to consider. If you have experienced the body recomposition yourself, I'd really love to hear from you down in the comment section below. So please be sure to share your experiences with us, what you may have found worked for you. Those are just 3 approaches that I'm familiar with, that I have used myself. They all kind of work the same. And again, like I said, at this stage in the game, muscle gains are like painfully slow with over 30 years lifting experience under my belt. I'm damn close to my genetic potential. So it's going to be really difficult to me to measure what is going to be a better approach when it comes to recomposition or building muscle at this point. So really looking forward to those of you who may have not been lifting for as long and what you're finding has worked best for you. Those are my thoughts. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, your experiences, and if you have any topics that you want me to cover in upcoming videos, please be sure to drop them down in the comment section below.